The Conspiracy to Distort Vedic Knowledge, Unveiling the Truth Behind Max Muller's Translations. Hello, everyone. If you are here, it means you're interested in understanding how this distortion happened. I am your host, on behalf of Team Kaalasya, and I welcome you all to this discussion. In today's video, we will delve deep into Hinduism and attempt to understand the complexities of our sacred traditions. We will discuss a topic that is very close to my heart, the systematic conspiracy by the British to distort Vedic knowledge. In this video, we will uncover the translations of Max Muller and the deep conspiracies that manipulated our sacred scriptures. These distortions brought our revered texts to a point where even the native people of India began to view them with suspicion. So, let us embark on this journey of discovery and expose the truths that have either remained hidden for decades or have been deliberately concealed from us. The role of Max Muller in Vedic translations. Before and after independence, if anyone had read the Vedas and scriptures in English, they would have certainly come across the name Max Muller. At the time, most scripture-related books were either in Sanskrit or in English, translated by Max Muller. Max Muller, considered a German scholar, was brought to India by the East India Company to work for the British Raj. He was entrusted with the task of translating our most sacred texts, the Vedas and scriptures. You might think that such a person must have been highly knowledgeable, but his role was a deliberate blow to India's soul, the repercussions of which we are still paying for today. You will be surprised to know that the person tasked with translating Indian scriptures had neither an adequate understanding of Sanskrit nor of English. This is akin to asking a blind person to describe the beauty of sunlight. A disastrous outcome was inevitable, and the British knew it. They wanted this outcome, and the damage they caused is something we continue to feel to this day. An entire generation influenced by the British studied and reflected upon Indian scriptures through the lens of the flawed translations commissioned by the British. This led to absurd interpretations, the effects of which still confront us, including the burning of books and hateful commentary by certain individuals. The British agenda against Indian knowledge systems. Indians have long been influenced by the British, especially those whose minds were deliberately instilled with hatred toward Brahmins. Why was this hatred cultivated? This is a separate topic we will discuss, but it involved stealing Indian knowledge to advance their own country while destroying our education system, particularly the Gurukul system, and imposing their English education model on us. As a result, today's generation, even with modern education, cannot achieve what the British accomplished without study or with minimal effort. Evidence of this can be found in their misinterpretations of Hindu scriptures, which they used to their advantage. Returning to the subject, Max Muller was a keystone in the British strategy to weaken Hinduism. However, the knowledge held by Brahmins and the Gurukul system posed the greatest challenge to them. This is why another British figure, Lord Macaulay, was brought to India to ensure Indians remained Indians by birth but were turned into Englishmen in education and mindset. The success of this agenda can still be seen in our society today. When foreigners had no idea how to cook food, India had a rich history of preserving unparalleled scriptures like the Vedas and global education systems like Nalanda and Takshashila. Max Muller's success and its impacts. Max Muller's arrival in India was so successful that even today, some people harbor hatred for scriptures, unaware that their sources were fundamentally flawed. Generations have accepted these flawed interpretations as truth and even based their arguments upon them. This flawed reasoning was often propagated by those who, despite being Indian by birth, had become British in mindset. They lacked Sanskrit knowledge but were well-versed in English. This ignorance made it almost impossible to understand scriptures, especially those written in ancient and complex Sanskrit. The conspiracy of British translations. The deliberate errors and misinterpretations in Muller's translations were sanctioned by the British authorities. The goal was clear: to instill shame in people about their identity, thus making them turn toward another. When Gurukuls were providing advanced education, why would Indians need English knowledge? This was the reason behind their conspiracy to manipulate the source of that knowledge through translators like Max Muller, who were neither Sanskrit scholars nor authentic interpreters of scriptures. Their objective was not accurate translation but the weakening of Hinduism's spiritual foundation. Colonial exploitation and cultural subjugation. The beginning of British colonization in India in 1757 marked an era of exploitation and cultural imperialism. The British realized that to subjugate the Hindu population, they needed to alienate them from the Vedic framework that guided their lives. This framework was the foundation of all Hindu systems, knowledge, scriptures, and culture. The removal of this foundation was challenging because Brahmins were the custodians of this knowledge. Religious, cultural, and practical wisdom was systematically embedded in societal governance and royal decision-making. To dismantle this structure, they had to target the Gurukul tradition, which had over 100,000 institutions at the time. Today, where are those Gurukuls? The systematic effort to distort and manipulate our sacred texts was designed to create an ideology that justified their colonial objectives. Max Muller's translations became a crucial part of this strategy, influenced by Portuguese and Italian missionaries who had arrived in India centuries earlier. The caste system, a colonial construct. The term caste was introduced into the translations of scriptures, even though it was never part of the Indian system. The word caste originates from the Portuguese term casta. Search for the origin of this word on the internet, and you'll see it predates the mention of caste in Indian texts. So how did it appear in scriptures? It was inserted. Describing Indian society as divided by caste has become fashionable today, but not a single scripture mentions such a division. During the 1901 census, overseen by Herbert Hope Risley, the British catalogued 2,378 castes and subcastes in India. The methodology and biases of this census have been criticized, but it was implemented in India because dividing the population was essential for the British. If this system truly existed, show me where in the Vedas, Puranas, or Manusmriti these 2,378 castes are listed. Interestingly, this number has now grown to 3,000 castes and 25,000 subcastes. Does this align with any Vedic scriptures? The truth is out there for anyone willing to search. This journey has just begun, and it's time to explore it further. Now, the question arises, why did Max Muller deliberately distort our sacred scriptures in such a way? As we discussed earlier, you might already understand this to some extent, but let us proceed according to documented evidence. The answer lies in Max Muller's own words. He believed that by weakening the spiritual foundation of Hinduism, the conversion of Hindus to Christianity could be made easier. This shocking confession reveals the true intentions behind his work. He saw Hinduism as a threat to Christian dominance and was fully committed to dismantling it. What is even more startling is that his work was supported by British colonialists. He was financially backed by the British authorities, who saw this manipulation as a way to exploit and control the Indian population. Even today, in certain segments of society, the impact of their efforts is visible. Many Indians were kept Indian by birth but made to think like the British mentally. This legacy persists. Even after over 75 years of independence, those who speak English are often given more respect than those who speak Sanskrit, Hindi, or their native languages. In this sense, the agenda of English dominance and Max Muller's work had a positive impact on their objectives but proved disastrous for Indian identity. His translations were used to create an ideology that undermined the spiritual foundations of Hinduism, justified the exploitation and oppression of Hindus, divided them, and perpetuated the myth that Hinduism was inferior to other religions. The tragic part is that we accepted this theory, just as we accepted Darwin's theory of evolution and the Aryan invasion theory. However, there is a vast difference between a theory and a proven principle. A theory is merely a hypothesis, not a validated truth. But because the British said so, it became unquestionable truth to many. This mindset filled us with such profound guilt about our own heritage that their agenda continues to affect us profoundly even today. To this day, there is a significant segment of our society that carries this sense of guilt. But we must not forget that the guilt instilled in us by the British is a blatant lie, a fraudulent ideology crafted by the colonizers to serve their own interests. This self-doubt has led countless Indians into the hands of missionaries, making religious conversions more accessible. Even today, this guilt is imposed upon us in various ways. However, after over 75 years of independence, living under such a mindset is nothing short of foolish. We must rise above these colonial indicators of mental servitude. We must reclaim our heritage and reassert our identity as original Indian Hindus. So, what can we do to counter this ideology? How can we reclaim our heritage? How can we strengthen our identity as Hindus? The answer lies in education, knowledge, and a deep understanding of our sacred texts. We must study the Vedas, Upanishads, and Puranas and understand them in their original context. We must support organizations and individuals who work to promote Hinduism and challenge the distortions and misinterpretations against our faith. In conclusion, the conspiracy to distort Vedic knowledge is a real and ongoing threat to Hinduism. We must be aware of the forces that repeatedly attempt to weaken our faith and take steps to counter them. We must reclaim our heritage, strengthen our identity, and promote a deeper understanding of our sacred texts. Let us work together for a brighter future, one rooted in knowledge, wisdom, and a profound understanding of our traditions. Jai Shri Ram, Jai Shri Krishna, Jai Mahakal. And finally, thank you for joining me on this journey of discovery. Important note: do not accept everything in this video as truth without questioning it. We encourage you to research, investigate, and seek understanding yourself. It's clear that not everything shown to us is always the truth. Evaluating the sources of information we follow is critical. Every individual's knowledge has its limits. A doctorate degree does not make someone omniscient. For instance, a PhD in management doesn't make someone an expert in space exploration unless validated. Otherwise, the same thing happens as it did with Indian scriptures when a person without Sanskrit knowledge distorted them decades ago. Be cautious.